Why are Canadians so angry? I get that question as a Canadian. People ask me that. Why are we just so angry? I thought you guys were, kind and pleasant and, passive aggressive. You're kind of like the Ned Flanders of countries. You're just, set in your ways. You say sorry all the time. Like, what is with you guys? Why are you so angry? Well, it turns out there's a reason for that. And the reason I'm addressing it is because there's a new statistic that came out. That's pretty alarming. So, CTV News saying half of young Canadian men are at risk of problem anger. A survey has found problem anger. And not the problem anger of, having your girlfriend on a road trip constantly asking for directions kind of anger. Or not the anger of, hey, I just want to finish this last mission of GTA 5 before I meet your in-laws. But this is kind of the anger that people have been experiencing, and not just younger men, but just and the entire population of Canada has been experiencing because of the economic uncertainty, because of just the direction of the overall demise of the country, how, just the 10 years of Justin Trudeau, now into Mark Carney, and it's just a continuation of a disaster. A lot of people are feeling this. A lot of people are feeling this. So, what does this article say about it? So, half of young Canadian men are at risk letting their anger interfere with their daily life, relationships, and work, new research suggests. A survey conducted by Intentions Consulting and the Canadian Men's Health Foundation found that 50% of men ages between 19 and 29 are at risk of problem anger compared to just 22% of all Canadian men. The findings reveal a troubling reality and warn of deeper stress and disconnection from support systems for young men, the CMHF said in a Wednesday press release. It's startling, but not shocking, said the president and CEO Kenton Boston, said CTV News Channel on Wednesday. Boston said young men, like many Canadians, experience economic stressors, including affordability concerns, job insecurity, and a lack of housing options. But there's also the switch that happens in society about masculinity and the negative conversations that are being often associated with that now. And all that combines to put pressure on young men in particular, he said. So it sounds like what they're saying here is not only just the economic factor, the reality of the fact that, you put in the effort, you put in the work hours, and you don't get the ability to survive. You're basically out on your own trying to make ends meet, even though you're putting in extensive hours. Like, the ability just to afford your basic essentials is becoming more and more increasingly a problem. So not only you're getting stress from that, but also culturally, there's a problem because men have been kind of suppressed throughout some time, that they're being told, toxic masculinity and, men are the problem in society. Oh, we just need more females, no, girl power. That's going to solve problems. That's going to do things. That's going to help things because, girls are more concerning than guys. But in reality, that's not true. That guys can be concerning. Guys can be, supportive and actually considerate. But they get slummed into this culture war, into this fake feminism that was created by the intelligence agencies, if you go back and research that. And it adds on to this problem. It adds more fuel to the fire and causes the separation to divide and conquer. That's the whole purpose of all of it. The survey found that 39% of Canadian men between ages 19 and 29 report a violent impulse when they get angry within the last month, compared to 16% of all Canadian men. Boston said it's important for young men to develop ways to deal with their anger before an impulse turns into action. There's the pontification, or the thought of doing something negative, which is one part of the conversation. The other part is acting on it, he said. Incidents where your fuse is shorter than it is normally is, Those are real signs about things that to be challenged and looked into to make sure that there is support to help to alleviate the angst and anger. Another obstacle many young men face is the shame associated with seeking help for mental health concerns, Boston noted. For many of us, there's a stigma and there's hesitancy to go to see clinicians or doctors for your mental health in particular. And so we're really getting behind this idea of talking to a friend or family members. This idea, you're not alone, he said. What you're going through is something that all of us can understand and appreciate. It's really a community effort to make sure young men in particular are heard, seen, and listened to, and they're not being chastised or put aside. The challenges facing younger men are also felt by other male groups, the survey found. 36% of all Canadian men who identified as how do you say that? BIPOC? BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, were also found to be at risk of problem anger. The same was true for more than a quarter of Canadian men aged 30 to 44. So that is that's interesting. That's interesting. And that I hope that kind of resolves that question of why it seems more and more Canadians appear to be more angry. And we're turning the country of, nice and prosperous and, courteous. We used to be the goody two shoes, and now we're, beating each other up and causing mayhem and screaming at each other. It's a lot. It's a lot to take in. There's a lot on people's shoulders. Obviously, they address the concerns of unaffordability. There's also culturally that, systematically men are being suppressed. They're being silent. They're being thrown under the bus and just ramping up stuff. And also the fact, they mentioned about the stigma of men going to reach out for help because, again, you're just being suppressed. You're being told that as a man, it's the importance of, sticking it out and, shoving down your feelings and not actually reaching out to, for help and support. And also the fact that, Men's Mental Health Month, which a lot of people didn't even know there's a Men's Mental Health Month. There actually is, but it also falls on the same month that Pride Month is on, and guess which one gets emphasized more? So that kind of shatters the ability that shatters the kind of momentum to break the stigma, to actually endorse and actually bring people together so that men don't feel displaced and they don't feel angered, they don't feel like they have no hope, and they have to resort to violent outbreaks like this. I'm not a psychologist, so I can't speak on the scientific analysis of it, but that's just what I'm coming from that. Here's what the CTV News Channel. So here's what they interviewed the Boston guy, Kenton Boston from the Mental Health Foundation, and here's what he said.
A new report is shedding light on the mental health issues facing young men in this country. It shows half of Canadian males under 30 are at risk of so-called problem anger. That's anger that interferes with daily life, relationships, or work. Kenton Boston is the president and CEO of the Canadian Men's Health Foundation. He joins me now. Kenton, good morning. So glad that you could join us today.
Good morning.
First of all, I want to get your reaction to this. This is a really high number of men feeling angry and that it is interfering with pretty much every aspect of their lives.
To be honest, it's startling, but not shocking. We had data that we released in the springtime that showed 1 in 2 men are socially isolated. There are a lot of reasons why. The things that everyone is impacted: the economy, jobs, affordability when it comes to housing. And there's also the switch that's happened in society about masculinity and the negative conversations that are often associated with that now, and that all combines to put pressure on young men in particular.
Right, and I'm assuming that would involve interpersonal relationships. What's the difference, Kenton, between being violent and violent impulses? This is something that came up in the study results.
So there's the pontification, the thought of doing something negative, which is the one part of that conversation. The other part is acting on it. And to be clear, if you listen to radio reports, it's a thing for some people still. Radio and traffic, there's often incidents of anger depending on where you are in the country, and so it's not that it's also pervasive as entirely negative. There are bubbling things that we're trying to get out in front of people. Incidents of where your fuse is shorter than it normally is. Those are the real signs about things to be challenged and look into to make sure that there is support to help that, to alleviate that angst and anger.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that. Men who are feeling angry, what are their options in dealing with that emotion?
So first and foremost, and we had a campaign in the summertime called "You're Not Alone," and that's about understanding that while many of us, there's a stigma and there's hesitancy to go to see clinicians or doctors for your mental health in particular, and so we're really getting behind this idea of talking to a friend, family members, this idea that you're not alone, that what you are going through is something that all of us can understand and appreciate. And we're asking for, it's really a community effort to make sure young men in particular are heard, seen, and listened to, that they're not chastised or put aside, that they're brought in. They just want a conversation, to be part of the conversation. And if you looked at what happened in the US with the election and Donald Trump, and the target audience was younger men often, and they just want to be heard and seen. And that's what we're really trying to promote, this sense of community with parents, friends, and family in particular.
Yeah.
So it's a lot to take in. Again, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a trained physician. I can't say, exactly what problems are, but, you could allude to a lot of different things they mentioned there. Just economically, things are not good. Society, when it comes to, just this uprise and, hate of toxic masculinity, which is like a fairly new term that came to people's, lexicon, the zeitgeist, just recently, that people, just assume that the best way to solve problems is to further demonize, men, just for being men. It's also interesting they mentions about the radio, like it's winking at the idea of media, which I think media also plays into why people are becoming more angry, because especially for older Canadians, anyone that's watching mainstream media and watching coverages from like CBC or CTV or Global or City News or any of these outlets, or even reading publications that are so specifically driven to a certain demographic to penalize another demographic in the same country or the same region, that's going to play a factor into people's anger. When you get the elbows up crowd chanting and screaming, and people going after conservatives, going after Alberta and saying that you guys are the problems in the world. It's people like you. It's Pierre Poilievre. It's all the anger. Even, Donald Trump. Things are going on in America. Cause all this anger. That's not good. That's not good. And I think that the media plays a factor into riving up people's emotions. It's not actually fact-based. It's not information. It's not informing people about this. It's triggering your impulses. It's triggering the audience member to get angst up and angered because of an emotional thing. And the same happens in the United States. You go and turn on MSNBC, where they talk about Trump bad, Trump this. Or you go on to Fox News, and it's the other way around. Trump is good, Democrats bad. But does it actually inform you? Does it actually bring you information on exactly why they have this perspective? No. But it's biased in that direction because it is dedicated to be in that persona, be in that space, to go and encapsulate their audience to have that emotional reaction. And it's furthering the divide. It's furthering people apart, which is causing a lot of this. So there's a lot to take in. There's a lot to take in on why people, especially younger males, younger people, this young demographic that's going into, getting out of high school, that's going into, workplaces, maybe think of starting a family, maybe starting to think of, going through the milestones of achieving livelihood in this country. I understand the pain. I understand the sympathy. I'm, a youngish Canadian. I turned 30 this year, so I guess still considered young, maybe. I don't know. But I feel the pain. I feel the hardship. I feel what it takes when you're in this space and life becomes unaffordable, and understand that it's frustrating, it's exhausting, it's angering. Even doing this podcast here, when I'm researching articles or I'm looking at data or I'm showing you these videos, I get emotional. I feel this kind of, built up angst about the direction of things, and I just don't have control over. But I do the best I can do. I channel the anger and frustration into these videos. And that's what a lot of people have been doing, is trying to find a creative outlet to channel that anger, to channel that passion, to channel, that angst, that anger, that frustration into something productive. And whether being, painting or sculpting or creating music or anything. People have been taking, kickboxing classes as a stress reliever. People are exercising more as a stress reliever. Whatever the case may be. There are outlets. There are ways to litigate away from actual violent confrontation into a healthier direction. So that's what I could say about that. I also want to add this in too. So this is a guy by the name of Red Pill Rick. And he says 50% of Canadians are concerned about paying their mortgage or rent. 62% are cutting spending to make ends meet. 49% are worried about losing their job. Official government numbers are fake. These things are getting way worse in the real world. So while the Liberal government and the House of Commons are patting themselves on the back because they just announced that they created 67,000 new jobs, don't be jumping up and down saying that's a good thing, because those 67,000 jobs that they created, one, they're part-time, and two, they're public service jobs. So it's not actually investing into industries. It's not good paying union jobs. It's part-time public service jobs that they're patting themselves on the back, saying that they saved a bit of the economy. Unemployment is not as bad as it is because we created a bunch of fake jobs. But as Red Pill Rick is saying, that the government official, the numbers that they're releasing aren't exactly living up to what people are really dealing with. And he links this is from BNN Bloomberg, and here's what they even had to say about it.
Nearly 50% of Canadians worry about the ability to pay costs monthly. Is that just housing costs or costs generally?
It is just their rent or mortgage payments, and there's not a massive difference between renters and mortgage payers. It's all about the same number. But what's interesting in this poll is that we did dig deeper and ask people, what are they doing about it? How are they making ends meet? And what struck us is that, yes, people are cutting back in their spending. About half of Canadians are cutting back in their everyday household spending. But where it gets interesting from there is when you look at where else people are cutting back, and the numbers get a little bit more granular. People are saving less than what they had been in the past. So 36% of Canadians with a mortgage or rent are saying that. We've got 26% who have withdrawn money from funds that they've saved over time. We've got 15% saying they've increased their debt. Some have changed jobs. Some have driven less vehicles. So there's a myriad of ways that Canadians are trying to make ends meet, but it is a bit of an overwhelming gloom.
One of our guests told us at the top of the show, talking about the U.S. economy, that things are a lot worse for many people than the official numbers would indicate, in particular in the area of joblessness. Do you think there is a lot of misery or economic trouble below the surface that we don't even hear about?
I think so. I mean, Canadians are fairly upfront with us. We've asked the question, are they worried about becoming unemployed? And about, again, a similar number, 49% say that they're worried about them or their significant other major income earner losing their job. And that number has dramatically increased over the last couple of years. So that's something we've tracked since about 2017.
That's a dramatic increase in people worrying about them or their partner losing their work.
Yes, and what a new one that's popped up as well is the number of people, 34%, who feel that they worry about their employer running into financial trouble, and that also has increased pretty dramatically in the last several years.
Well, is there any bright spots here?
Well, we thought, last wave we did this, which was in January, we saw a hint that things were starting to move up. But the gloom and doom actually carries on into the future this time around. It's only 14% who have optimism that things will get better in the future. So right now, it's a pretty big hill to climb. 14% say that it will improve, 38% say it's status quo, and then a whopping 38% again that feel that things will decline in the next 6 months. So we still have a ways to go. Those interest rates from the Bank of Canada that have been recently announced, I don't think they've trickled in yet. Consumers aren't really seeing the impact because we still have a big chunk of mortgage holders that are renewing in this coming year and the following year. And so they're anticipating the future pain ahead.
So just only 14%. 14% have hope for the future of this country. That number is dropping. That adds to the anger. That adds to the frustration. Just hearing that makes me emotional. 14% just have, in I guess, blind trust to think that Mark Carney, the Liberal government, and the parliamentary structure that has been overtaken by the WF overlords that have pretty much taken over the entire Western Front, let's just be honest about it, still think there's hope for this nation. Still think that there's going to be some sort of comeback after all this. Even though we know the governments have lied to you, they falsified numbers to make themselves look good. When they announced all these, jobs coming in, they're not sustainable jobs. They're not actually creating anything for the economy. Industries are, rolling bankrupt, and it's just getting worse and worse. At the same time, they're telling people that you need to implement more migrants into the country, so that when businesses do, flourish and industries do bounce back, that they're going to need workers. They're going to need workers. They're not going to hire Canadians because they don't want to actually hire people for a decent wage, meaning that they don't want to invest into this country, which is kind of the whole purpose of why Mark Carney is prime minister. As I stated, kind of the intentions of why Mark Carney, a central banker who magically appeared out of nowhere and, barely noticed his existence for the last how many years. The only reason he's prime minister is because he's hand-selected by the WEF to empty out this country and turn Canada into a vessel state for the WEF. That's it. And he's doing it successfully, unfortunately. So, I would love to have hope. I would love to be on the side. I hope to have hope, especially with the people. I don't have hope in the politics. I don't even have hope in Pierre Poilievre. I have hope in the people that are witnessing this, that are seeing the numbers, that are going to grocery stores and realizing they can't afford basic foods to feed their families, that are starving themselves so they can feed, their families, and starving themselves to be able to afford that. I'm hoping that people are realizing this and maybe come to the conclusion that we have gone beyond fixing this with electoral politics, that a re-election is not going to solve anything, that there needs to be some sort of action. There needs to be a grassroots movement, just like we saw with the Freedom Convoy, just like you see in other countries, and really systematically, frankly, overthrow the corrupted parliamentary structure and bring back Canada to its fundamental roots, the good of Canada, the actual prosperity that this nation once had, that I envisioned, that I used to grew up thinking that there was a possibility. That's the way I see it, at least. And I want to just add to this. I pulled this up quickly. This is from the Adam Smith Institute. I don't know who Adam Smith is, but he has an institute. He must be up there. And there was this article here, and I always thought it was interesting that, when we talk about happiest countries and life expectancy, obviously the go-to answer is the Nordic countries, Finland, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, the Danish countries. Why are they always successful? Why are they always successful? Why are they always happy? Is it because they just eat amount of fish? Is it because the water is not, what exactly makes it so prosperous that people enjoy it so much that they would not go anywhere else? And here's what this institute is saying. It says why Danes are the happiest. Over the past few years, Denmark has incredibly well in the World Happiness Report, ranking number 1 in 2016, 2014, and 2013, and only missing out on the top spot by 2 places in 2015. Recently, we became more aware of Danish culture and values as television shows like The Killing, Borgen, and The Bridge have flooded our screens, and the craze for self-help books based on Haig, how do you say it? I don't know, are set to be big sellers this Christmas. But before the upping sticks and moving to Copenhagen straight away, we should first work out what exactly makes Danes so happy so we can create it at home. The most obvious reason for the Danes' strong sense of life satisfaction and general positive mood is their work-life balance, which is heavily weighted towards the life part. The average full-time working week is the lowest of any OECD country at 37.3 hours, equating to less than 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Compared this to the US's average full-time working week of 41.6 hours, or UK's 42.2, or even Turkey's 50.5, it becomes apparent to Danes spend significantly fewer hours at work than most people. Over the course of a year and a lifetime, the gap between hours worked in Denmark and hours worked elsewhere widens when holiday is taken into account. Over the course of a year, Danes work 61% of hours that Indians do and 80% of the hours Americans do, with only Norwegians, the Dutch, and Germans spending less time at work. This perhaps because Danes have a legal right to 5 weeks of paid holiday a year, so they are encouraged to take time off, whereas the United States, there is no legal requirement for employers to offer paid holiday. Furthermore, Denmark tops the list of the time spent on leisure and personal care, with an average of 16.06 hours devoted per day to personal activities outside of work, such as walking, socializing, and eating. So, it goes on and on. It's a fairly lengthy article. You can go check it out for yourself, but that's one thing. And the thing about Denmark, and I know people will argue and say, well, Danish countries pay more in taxes. They have to pay more out of pocket in their taxes, and that doesn't seem good. Well, if they're paying more in taxes, why are they still so happy? Maybe because those taxes that they pay more out of actually go back into their communities. And that's the difference. That's the difference. When you actually pay into your country, the country actually pays back in investments. Meaning that if we paid our taxes to the Canadian government can then pay us back in investing into our country, investing into infrastructure, investing into our military, investing into hospitals, investing into schools, education, daycare centers, whatever the case may be, keeping the money within our borders. That's what makes this country so prosperable. And people looked at this as like a socialist, utopian dream. It's a unicorn, but really, it's actually a socialized capitalist country. Danish countries are. And the reason they're prospering, the reason why they're so happy, is even though they pay higher taxes, that money gets invested back into your country, and that's why the country is taking off compared to us. We pay more in taxes, And we're getting angered by it because those taxes don't get reflected into investments into our country. It goes to Ukraine. It goes to Israel. It goes to other countries. It goes to global affairs. It goes to increasing the paychecks for politicians. It goes towards the 67,000 now created part-time jobs in the public sector. It doesn't actually go and return back to the communities to make the communities more prosperous. So that also adds into it. And that's why a lot of people are angered, are tired, are emotional, are in angst. And I feel that pain. I sympathize with that pain, which is why we need to come together and take that communal anger and use it effectively, not by antagonizing each other, not by, beating each other up or calling each other out or, making this, fight against left versus right or red versus blue or whoever you are and blah, blah, blah. Stop the divide, come together, realize that we all have common causes, and come together so we can actually fight a good fight against the tyranny, against the oppressors, against the oligarchy that has caused a lot of this. In the words of Frederick Douglass, I'll work with anyone to do good and no one to do evil. And that is a promise. That is a statement that I'm committed to, because we need a lot more people that are committed to that principle. That I don't care who you voted for. I don't care where you came from. I don't care what, you feel about LGBTQ issues. That we can put that aside if we can put that aside for a second and focus on the fact that people can't afford groceries in this country, that people are starving themselves just to keep the heat on, to keep the lights on, that they have to choose between rent and a car payment. That affects everybody. That affects everybody, no matter who you are in this country. So if we can come together, stuff can happen, but they don't want us to come together. Hence why all this separation and divide.